Everybody be gentle with me. I'm going solo right now. We're live on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. And not only that, I'm going solo, and I need your help because we're covering more than one episode this go-around. So I'm wondering how many of you guys have celebrated the American Thanksgiving. And I know we got a lot of international listeners from all sorts of countries, Australia, South America, Europe, England. It's important to make those distinctions. And I'm wondering how many of you guys have a day off or how many of you guys are listening at work and stuff like that because I'm going solo. I'm going to kind of need your help and your feedback. We're going to be talking about a lot of things and hopefully breaking down this episode a little bit more concisely, a little bit more to its nitty-gritty parts because, I mean, who wants to listen to a recap episode anyway? I'm hoping this is going to be a little bit more of a like audience participation kind of thing because the main thing about this podcast is the direction it's kind of tending to go towards, and that's going to be more of an audience participation sort of thing. I mean, the whole idea of squawking is the idea of like CB radios and squawking at each other on the road as truckers and stuff like that, you know, and basically trying to keep each other going, keep on trucking, as, you know, Sarah was saying on Fear the Walking Dead. So a lot of it's that. A lot of it is really just about keep on keeping on and really just the love of the show. And sometimes it goes into deeper points and sometimes it's just fluff, like, you know, or maybe even just random ideas or thoughts about the show. And I kind of want to hear from you guys. So with that, let's get the show started. The end of the last episode, we were introduced to the time jump, or not the last episode, but episode 6. We were introduced to the time jump, and we kind of got reintroduced at the beginning of that episode, and part of that involves this new group. And the importance of this new group is really more of a kind of like a condensed version of all the other groups. The way these kind of veteran groups interact with this new group that's kind of been roughing it on its own. They've been taking care of themselves. They've obviously been whittled down to their small and finer parts. But at the end of the day, I mean, they do kind of represent the same kind of heart and ideal as the other groups. And they kind of act as a foil for the rest of the groups that are kind of, at the moment, just different now. What we're seeing is a hardened group that's been through a lot of things. I mean, not only the departure of Rick, but it seems as though that some things have happened. Oh, hey, Superfan Rob, I see you, I hear you, and I accept you. Some of the things that are going on within the groups is that there has been a sort of cataclysmic event of some kind where it's really torn up each and every group, and in particular some of the warriors and individuals in that group, namely the ones that we're going to be following in the next for these two, maybe even the next episode, is Carol, Daryl, and Michonne. Now, one thing that was alluded to in the episode prior, or actually 2 episodes prior to 6, so episode 4, was Negan's interaction with Michonne. And one of the things that's important to point out is how he kind of got under her skin, basically saying that, you know, you're a warrior just like me, doing this law-making thing and Susie Homemaker thing. You know, it's only going to last you so long, and it does bring about the idea of PTSD. And how do you get a warrior to kind of live in peacetime and you know, within laws and boundaries and not. And you could see this also in Carol, obviously in the episode prior too, where she kind of goes ham on some of the marauders. You know, ham, roasted ham, honey baked. But you get the idea, is that they kind of act. They're used to acting. They're not used to pausing and waiting for consensus and all that stuff. Even though Michonne's been fighting for a charter, I think it's more out of self-preservation, though. I mean, I don't think she wants to go down that path. Carol is kind of on automatic, and I think she can go either way, obviously, as we've seen. Hey, I am the Dark 2. It's good to see you. I'm actually going to need you. I'm actually going to need both you and Superfan Rob, because I am going solo today. And so I'm going to bring up a couple topics, some big bird's eye view kind of topics right now, because you can basically break down all 3 of these episodes to 3 main points, at least in my view. And then obviously you can drill down to each of these and kind of blow them up and really discuss them. Because, and it's kind of interesting because, I mean, I've taken notes on Who Are You Now twice now because of the kind of lack of broadcasting on our part. So the one thing I wanted to talk about was, the Warriors, and I kind of went through that. Daryl, Carol, and Michonne. And the one thing that's interesting about both of them is that they they haven't given up. They kind of lived up to Sasha's ideal in Rick's flashback. And part of that is the idea that the people that make those tiny sacrifices along the way, or major sacrifices, but, in the grand scheme of things, it would be better to have them around, but, they do what they can to move the story forward, to move our group forward, to benefit everybody. And they do try to live up to that ideal. Things have happened, things that we don't know. And it's kind of annoying because you're kind of like, because every single time they allude to that and they're almost about to get into that, they get caught off somehow. And it's really frustrating because you feel like it's right on the tip of your tongue. And then what I'm afraid of, because we only have one episode before the midseason, is that we're not going to get to that part because of the introduction of the Whisperers. Like, we're not going to end up knowing what happened. But something did happen, something other than Rick. And it's basically torn the communities apart. And so, it's the idea of and so the things that keep them going are the tiny beacons that shine out, as Michonne says, it's also people falling back to almost like their primordial state. Like Michonne, in some sense of the word, is kind of gone back to her security job back when when they first found Alexandria with both her and Rick. And even though there's a sort of council and stuff like that, she's kind of, in a way, she's kind of on autopilot. As long as they have this role or protocol that says they're not going to have new people, she doesn't have to worry about actually challenging anybody. And, everybody kind of goes along with her because she's in some ways right. And whatever had happened, whatever traumatic event that happened to all of them, really keeps them, they kind of defer to her because, she knows more than anybody what can happen when you, it's probably trusting a stranger or trusting somebody that they love that betrayed them. And that's what it feels like is going on. And I'm going to get into that a little bit more in just a second. But then you have Carol, who has kind of, instead of falling into like a prior state, sort of, because we'll talk about that in a sec, is that she's kind of fallen into this whole being the queen of the king, raising a son, and this idea of she's not with her deceased husband who treated her like crap, but she has kind of deferred to being the wife, maybe a little bit more behind the scenes, kind of like when she was around Sophia, and she's relegated herself to being the mom of the prince, the queen of the king, and you do see her do things. She is contributing to the community, but she's not taking on an active role of being that warrior. And maybe that's kind of where Carol has kind of always lived, striking when people least suspect her, but I don't think she's seen any of that in the last 6 years. And so, she keeps going. I did want to point out something very interesting when it came to each of their tiny beacons, and that's the tiny beacons that keep them moving on. Obviously, Michonne, she finds the cowboy character that looks a lot like Rick in many of the season posters where he's doing that gun pose. But there's other things too, like when Daryl sees the walker caught in the tree, he doesn't kill it. He sees that if the worms are climbing and burrowing through that walker and the birds can benefit from that he just leaves it alone. Can't do anything about it, and as long as it's there, the birds can use it. And Carol's is that little flower that's in the crack of one of the floors of the kingdom, and that kind of reminded me a lot of, and I think a lot of you are old enough to remember, this is if you remember the Scarlet Letter, the author talks about his boring job. I think he was either like a patent, not a patent clerk or copyright, or I forget what he was. But he was talking about how boring his work was, and then he would look outside towards the prison. He would notice the flowers creeping up through the grounds. Oh yeah. And then the author basically says, something beautiful coming out of something so ugly. Yeah, exactly. So Eye in the Dark too. She says that Carol said that people underestimated her, cooking cookies with one hand and blowing her brains out with the other. And that's exactly. I call her in simplest terms like she's the chameleon. She has this one. She projects this one appearance, and then she kind of, when people least expect it, attack on the other. And she did that with Jed a bunch of times too, especially in the hostage situation. She was able to fool him again in the scene with the savior stragglers, basically. And so I mean, and they keep falling for it too, apparently, so it's very interesting. And I think on one hand they kind of respect her for it too, but on the other, they just keep falling for it. So what's up with that? So yeah, and that's kind of what I'm saying. Like, so they do find reasons to move on, and obviously Judith is one of them. RJ, Michonne's or Rishon's child. It sounds like RJ is Rick Jr. Let's just get that cat out of the bag. But yeah, there's a lot of reasons to kind of keep going. I mean, Daryl, I don't know what his deal is. I mean, but maybe he did express, by the way, I think it was even the first episode of this season, how he's not built to live inside the walls. And so I think he got his wish, and he's okay with that. He has a dog, the dog, I think he's been talking about that, and how he kind of want to live out in the open. And I don't think he meant to live on his own. I think maybe he wanted to have a small group to kind of be around, but I think after what had happened, apparently, I guess it was just the best for him. He was just looking for Rick, and then just ended up staying out there. But yeah, they're like kind of on autopilot, all of them in some way. But I think the first person to kind of step out of bounds is Carol. I think she does kind of defer her own desires. I mean, maybe in a way it is her desire. She is fallen into that mom role, and she does kind of look to see how she can propel a future via the vehicle that is her quote-unquote son, like, Henry. And so, if she can't do it for herself, she's going to do it for him. And I think part of that is it's kind of interesting to see her take the first few steps, because not only does she, and of course, in the most Carol manipulative way, the first steps being, okay, so Henry wants to learn smithing. Cool story. Let's use Henry, my son, to get Daryl out, back into communities, and maybe even take care of him so that he can learn to kind of be a part of something again. And in the process of doing that, get Daryl out in the open, get him part of the community, and then, who knows what can happen after that. I mean, maybe Carol can do more. There is this whole idea of the fair coming up, too. And that's another thing that's kind of going on, too. And so in the process of having this fair, Henry's going to Hilltop. Hilltop has been in communication, obviously, with the kingdom, so they have a good relationship. And so they can have some sort of even better rapport, because Henry, and now we're trading people in communities and stuff like that. And Daryl could be a part of Hilltop for a little while. So, it just, everything just in the process of making Henry more useful for the kingdom, we're strengthening communities and getting Daryl out of hiding and hopefully doing something more with that. So, yeah, and then what motivates the other groups even more is this introduction of this new group, the, Magna's crew. And so I think Michonne for a very long time has been talking to Rick and possibly Carl, basically justifying her actions. And that's really what it comes down to. She's literally having arguments with Rick and Carl in lieu of talking to anybody else. And she knows that it's because of the steps she's taken to quote-unquote protect Alexandria. Now, I mean, I don't know what happened any more than any of you do. I know that you guys have your theories. But when you see this new group, it really does challenge her perceptions. I think the rest of the group for many years has grown tired of not trusting. I think they've grown tired of not, bringing in new people. Maybe they're a little bored of seeing each other's faces. But at the same time, I think people are in a pliable state at Alexandria. They have all this stuff. They're doing really well, I think, and they wanna do more. And I think they need to, and it's kind of interesting how Michonne every once in a while will find a way to pump the brakes too, and she really does have these really good insights, and really does get people to pause at least to find out whether this is exactly what they want too, and it may, what everybody may think they want is a new group and to do new things with new people. She does remind them of the dangers. She does point out some interesting things about the group that she sees that nobody else is seeing because they've got these rose-tinted glasses. So, and I think it's a good thing. I think if you're going to make a decision, you might as well be an informed one, right? So with that, but no matter what anybody says, no matter what Michonne says, I think at the end of the day, they want to maintain a sense of, they're going to challenge them. They're going to challenge Michonne, whether she likes it or not, because she knows what she's doing is kind of counter to what Carl and Rick would have wanted. And then by extension, Judith, because she does remember, even though she says it's starting to fade. I think we've beaten that one to death. But if you guys have anything to say about that, oh, hey, Eye in the Dark is on YouTube also. So I like Magna's group too, Eye in the Dark. I think what's really good about it is how small they are in number, how different they are in personality. And one of the best things that I like about them also is how they exemplify, and this is something I'm going to get into next. Hey, what's up, Sean? Nashville Negan. Is the idea of this big idea of the heart of the group. And it's something that we haven't really latched onto in all of the seasons. We kind of refer to them as, moral compasses, but I think at the end of the day, what we haven't focused on, and I think the closest we ever got to the heart of a group is Dale, in my opinion. Dale, and you could say Glenn, but I think Dale, and I think people miss it, Dale. And I think bringing in people like Luke and Bernie, or the idea of Bernie at least, is kind of important because, and as we go through the communities, we'll start to see the heart of every other group, and how essential it is for people to not only survive. Survival is just part of the equation. It's something that Luke says is that, survival of the fittest isn't just the idea of beating out, your natural opponents. But it's also kind of like your means of building communities, of surviving together. I mean, because you can be a Neanderthal, be mighty, be powerful, be able to round out your, any natural obstacles, or even, animal obstacles or anything like that. But, the other thing is that you can survive better, longer, and you can stay sane when you have community. And then furthermore, art, reasons for living, beauty. Everybody on this show looks really absolutely grimy and ugly. But at the same time, the idea of beauty is kind of a huge thing. Beauty is kind of what keeps our societies moving. It's what allows us to keep looking at television shows. It's kind of a weird thing to have to talk about, but when you look at something beautiful, or when you appreciate writing that's really great, acting that's really dramatic, it keeps you watching. And so it's things like that. Beautiful things are kind of what keep us going. In a world where, let's just face it, all of us have everything that we kind of need right now. In whatever kind of economic state that you're in, I find that usually things have never been better than they are now, barring any impending apocalypse, just in our world at least. So there's just no doubt that in whatever state that you're in, beauty is going to have some sort of priority or some sort of importance. And yeah, maybe it's low on the Maslow's hierarchy of needs in the apocalypse, but at the same time, when you've established your survival, well, what now? It can't just be about food and, and camaraderie. It's got to be about art. It's got to be, it's got to be something more, right? So, before I go on to the heart of the group, I wanted to talk about theories on what that thing was, what that event was. And I'm going to go a little slowly here so you guys can chime in as well. One of the most prominent theories that I've kind of seen, and I kind of agree, because let me tell you what my dumb theory was before Sunday rolled around and kind of ruined it. The person I hadn't seen in episode 6 was Enid, and I thought, like, what happened? What could have happened? And who have we not seen yet? And the one person that I didn't see was Enid. And I was like, okay, somebody done killed Enid. And it just rocked the entire community. Oh, just survive somehow. Well, she did. And then we see her at Hilltop, as a prominent doctor, trying to even get some growing space for her medicines. So I think the interesting, so that kind of left, that kind of made me think, okay, who's left? Now, what we did see in episode 5 was we did see, some of the more visual Oceanside people, like, especially Kathy, whom we kind of sent it off at the beginning of our last episode. We did see her kind of go, and what I thought initially was, okay, wait, it can't be Oceanside. But then the more I thought about it, and I saw the Marauders, the Savior Marauders, Regina having the Oceanside harpoon, I was kind of thinking, well, maybe the communities had decided together, finally, as a group, that Oceanside was to pay for the chaos that ensued at Bridge Camp. I mean, especially after Rick died. Emotions are hot, you know what I mean? So I think as a group, they kind of decided, hey, Oceanside, you gotta go. It's over for you. So maybe they decide together to kind of maybe execute them, exile them, which is kind of really fucked up if you think about it, because, you know, when more than half of their population had died, you know, all the men and some of the children at Oceanside, and then they decide to put them down for what they did at Bridge Camp. Or actually, not really necessarily what they did at Bridge Camp, what they did on the slide to kind of get the saviors back from the long while ago for all their suffering, you know, put them down, because we haven't seen them at all. We've seen some saviors and some saviors that have joined the camps and are now trusted, but I think it has to do something with that. And I'm the Dark 2 says, yeah, okay, do you think Michonne and Daryl are the only two branded? I would wager a guess to say that they're not the only two, but they are the two active warriors, I think, when it comes to, when you talk about warriors. I mean, as you and I have both said, Carol's kind of a comedian? No, well, a little bit. Chameleon. So I think that of the two, I think that she, you know, she would kind of find a way to not be. But yeah, it just begs the question, you know, like, what was it that, who betrayed them at the end of the day? Who betrayed them? What had happened? Or what did they have to do or what did they have to do, and who did they have to do it to, if that's the case, right? So yeah, I think that's the real question. I mean, when I saw Daryl's brands or scars, I noticed that he had a couple of extra slashes. Like when I saw Michonne's, I saw only the one X, but I saw with Daryl like an X and 2 lines, so I thought like 12. You know, I was like, so Daryl's 12 and Michonne's 10. But somebody quickly called me out on that, you know, and said, oh, you know, Daryl got beat up by his daddy. And I'm like, well, we haven't really talked about that since season 1 or 2. So, I mean, I wouldn't think that, I mean, maybe some of them, but I mean, who knows? So, you know, I don't think it's that. Now, obviously, if you look at Magna's group and you had to pick who would be the heart of the group, the one that could express himself, is Luke. And it seemed like Bernie was a little bit of the comedy. He would kind of keep things light, you know, annoy people, that sort of thing. And I think I can always admire like a ball buster or like somebody that's just willing to get on your nerves a little bit to kind of keep a lasting impression. Like, I mean, if you don't have more to offer than just protection and being rough and a fighter, you got to use your skills where you can. Now, what's good about a small group is that you can kind of pin each person down, you know, figure out their skills, what they can do. And then, you know, obviously Luke, not really much in the way of fighting, but at the same time, he's able to express people's opinions. He's kind of smart. He has ideas. You know, he's pretty book smart. So when it comes to decision making, he has some foresight, you know, some ideas. Maybe it's not real world ideas, but, you know, at the same time, when he offers his insight about, you know, the Neanderthals and the humans and who wins out, you know, he does give people some, you know, some insight into, you know, how important some things are in society. And, you know, and especially if you have a community, a protected community, like, he would be invaluable, you know, in terms of, you know, how to shape it in terms of keeping people alive and interested and interesting. You know, I mean, if all the kingdom can eke out as a fair, I mean, I'm sure that Luke could think of programs to keep everybody kind of interested. So I'm really, you know, I'm kind of really into this character, even though a lot of people are kind of saying, you know, and because, of course, I don't read the comics, so some people have been saying that Luke is going to be, you know, killed off at some point, and that's kind of upsetting because I think bringing out this idea of the heart of the group and making that a very important thing to, as a concept for all these communities, is really important because I think it really exemplifies how important it is to maintain that, because I think it keeps the communities moving. It makes people not have to beg for scraps in terms of, you know, shiny beacons of hope. I mean, these people keep communities flowing and alive. So, yeah, you know, the kingdom, if you had to pin down the kingdom's heart in terms of who wins out in that department, before I continue with that, yeah, I'm the Dark 2 says he did have scars from his dad's beatings, but the X on the lower left side is new. The top right shoulder, I'm going to check that out. Well, yeah, please do. I mean, I know you're a huge Norman Reedus aficionado, so I appreciate your input. And to further that, I think, yeah, it's in the same lower left side. It kind of makes me think, like, you know, obviously we could pin it down to somebody who mistrusted them or something like that, but part of me has this, like, instinct that, like, okay, that's kind of around where the kidneys are, too. So did somebody need a kidney and then died on them? Like, that would be a horrible thing to have happened. You know, maybe that would make me not want to bring in people, I think. You know, just to, you know, save them and just to lose them again. But it could be anybody. Or it could be, like, one of those black market kidney type of stealing in the middle of the night sort of things. You know, I need this kidney. And, well, who's a surgeon enough to kind of do that anyway? But I don't know, it's just, this is weird sort of thing to see it be in the same spot, you know? But anyway, so, but yeah, I mean, you could look at Jerry and you could say that he's the kind of heart of the kingdom, but I think at the end of the day, when it comes to right, wrong, it being involved, you know, the charisma and all that stuff. I mean, Henry is a capable warrior too, so there is a little bit of a difference between a Luke and a Henry. So when you look at Henry, he's pure of heart. He's kind of like, if you had to look at it in sort of a lens, you had to think about those knights that are pure of heart that can't enter certain domiciles and unless you are pure of heart. And we see by the end of episode 7 that he's not as much pure of heart. Maybe he's been thinking of eating it a little bit too much. But, you know, I think I'd give him a pass in the post-apocalyptic world. I think I would give him a pass anyway because he sounds like he's a cool dude. But, you know, he wants to do what's right, you know, fight what's wrong, kind of what Carol had told him in season 8, I believe, as young Maxon. Henry had once received that advice. But in terms of practicality, I think Carol is starting to see that, like, look, the dude wants to be a part of the world, but I think he needs to learn some hard knock lessons in order to kind of proceed. And I think part of that training is going to be with Daryl, you know, out in the wild, but also part of that's going to be, and that's the thing. I mean, if you look at the episode 6, when they run into the Savior Marauders, think about it. I think that Carol had meant to bring Henry through this route where she kind of knew that the Saviors were going to be, either to kind of deal with them and teach Henry that lesson, or to, you know, realize that there are people out there that want to do harm. And, you know, you're going to have to be flexible. You're going to have to know it's not just about right or wrong and dying in the name of pursuit of a cause, you know, that sort of thing. Life has meaning, and so there's value in teaching Henry that lesson. I mean, so it kind of begs the question. So before I continue about asking the question, yes, thank you, I Am the Dark too. She went back to the episode when Merle saw Daryl's back, and the X is in the top right shoulder. Good call, thank you. Had a feeling. I didn't know about the other scars, the 2 lines next to the X, which made me think of numbers like Roman numerals. But thank you. So, yeah, so he needs to know the difference between right and wrong. Yeah, and I think he's getting a good lesson so far. And what's interesting about Henry is that he's not oblivious to Carol's, you know, chameleon-like-esque character, too. He knows she's a manipulator. He knows that she has the ability to kind of weave in and out of situations. She knows that she does this with King Ezekiel all the time, who I call Zeke, because it's easier. And, I had a question, so... So the question that I actually had about Carol is, do you think that Carol intentionally took Henry through that route towards Daryl's place to teach him a lesson about, you know, via the Marauders? I know that there's a little bit of delay, so I won't be waiting for your answers, but I will take a look. You know, I'll be looking while I continue. So if you wanted to talk about the heart of Alexandria, there's quite a few people that you can look to. You know, first, the easy one to get out of the way is Judith. You know, she's taking real world lessons that she's getting from Negan, but she's also got Carl's, you know, answers, Carl's like desires in her head, and Rick's kind of sacrifices and the things that he says and does and what he wanted in the long term. She puts her foot down when it comes to not, you know, to saving Magna's group. She says, enough's enough. We gotta tend to these people. We just can't leave them here. And the other person that I would kind of choose, there's actually 2 people I would choose in terms of 2 other people at Alexandria that I would choose to be the heart. One of which is Siddiq, and he's kind of like a living embodiment of Carl's desires, Carl's wish for the future. And I think it's in the forefront of his thoughts every single day. I think he thinks about it all the time. I also think, that there's a part of him that wishes he could speak out a little bit more. I know that he's been looking at, communicating with Hilltop a little bit via Aaron. So there's that. But there's also, there's also like when Luke asks him about, what's changed, what caused you to kind of stop looking to strangers? He goes, things, I forget what exactly he says. He says, I should bring up my sticky notes. But yeah, he says something to the effect of, things happen, some things change. And I know that's not what he wants, he's always going to be the one to kind of say, hey, we got to take in people, because he is one of those people. But the third person at Alexandria that we need to look at in terms of the heart of the group is Father Gabriel. And if you think about it, he, out of all the people who's kind of grown to become a little bit tougher, it was kind of interesting to see him at the council say, we are not soft. He's kind of come a long way. TES. Eye in the Dark 2. Oh, I think you mean yes. Okay, so I think Eye in the Dark is 2 is agreeing with me that Carol did intentionally bring Henry through an area where she knew the saviors would be. Yes, I'm glad you agree with me, because that was kind of in my mind. Why would she bring her son in harm's way? That sort of thing. But then also, why wouldn't she? It's obvious that he needs a hard lesson in terms of figuring out, how to. It's not always about black and white, right and wrong, which I had thought was Carol learning things, basically learning from past experience. It's from the prison, taking matters into her own hands and burning people alive to keep people safe, but to also, it's kind of like an orthodox approach. But I would have thought she would have grown a little bit in terms of not, being at least somewhat of an example. But yeah, so Father Gabriel, sorry, I got off track a little bit, but Father Gabriel, being the third heart of Alexandria, he's come a long way. He's got, he's been through so much. He's been through this, sight-altering illness, and it's kind of interesting to see him still maintain a sense of heart and hope, and to be this kind of beacon of community and counsel, and in some senses he goes beyond. He kind of goes over of Michonne sometimes, saying, oh, hey, let's put it to the vote, like what the fate of these people, like instead of putting it in her hands and letting her take control. It's kind of interesting to see him kind of assert his authority, his kind of heart authority, but his authority nonetheless. We see that he is capable. We know that he can take care of himself, but I think the key is that it's knowing that he can do that, knowing that he's part of the group now finally, knowing that he's not going to go back, knowing that he confronted Anne, somebody he loved very much 6 years ago, because things have changed, and for the greater good and for the sake of the community, in order to kind of move things forward. And so I think he's the heart of the group because the heart wants what the heart wants, and some of that is finding out new communities and seeing what's out there, and really putting it to a vote when it comes to this new group, seeing that there is a level of heart that but also seeing the reactions of everybody around him, like looking at Aaron, and looking at Rosita and Judith, their desire to help. And I think there's a natural part of him. He's still the priest, he's still, that's part of his, I would say it's part of his DNA, it's not something that he can't ignore, the desire to help people. So, why not, right? Why not embrace that part of you that wants to do more, for people? So Alexandria is in the position to, and maybe it's a hindrance too, like having three hearts means that there's three people kind of pushing in a certain direction. And it may be a direction that's not, ideal for them as a community, for whatever thing that they faced a long time ago. So it kind of remains to be seen. So what I'm going to do right now is talk about Hilltop. Hilltop is a weird one. I don't think we have enough data on Hilltop to determine who the heart is. I do know that when it comes to Hilltop, I do believe that Jesus is partially the heart, and I would even say he's kind of like a half heart. Without Tara, I don't think he would be able to keep things moving. And it's kind of funny when you think about it, because if you think about how useless Gregory was, and this is something I actually mentioned in previous episodes, and I asked Carol this question, was do you think life at Hilltop would have been better with Gregory in charge, but as ineffectual as he was, with Maggie as his number 2, he would be kind of like a punching bag, effectively like a punching bag. You could blame everything on the president, but like the person that's really in charge, let's say like the Dick Cheney of the operation, is Maggie. And everybody loves Maggie. Everybody loves that, we can crap all over Gregory, but we know that Maggie's really the person that's getting everything done. And so we kind of have the same situation here. I mean, if you look at Jesus and Tara, Jesus is kind of like checked out. And at first I was kind of like ticked off because I kind of like Jesus. I kind of like that he's fair-minded. I like that he listens. I like that he knows the people. I think he could be a good leader. I think he's a good soldier. I think he's loyal, but I think he's kind of like a Daryl too. He's not good inside the walls. You can clearly see that he's not comfortable in Maggie's office when we see him at Hilltop, refusing to take it. So there are those elements. There's elements of, he's a complicated character. He wants what he wants. He wants to be able to look, kind of like Aaron also, he wants to go out and venture and find new people and bring them in, but it's kind of also against protocol, as we see in the sneak peek for this Sunday's mid-season finale. How they're even having the Alexandrians, Diane is having them disarm. So it's kind of indeterminate. If Tara's the one half, the right ventricle, Jesus is the left ventricle, and maybe that's what keeps the heart, the heart moving. Or maybe it's some of these new guys. I'm not entirely sure, but it could be like, Addie and those 3 at Hilltop. And I know that we're going to see some more of that when this Sunday rolls around. And that's the other thing too. Like I'm hoping that Sunday is long enough to be able to cover more than just the Whisperers reveal, because there's a part of me that, as I mentioned before, that wants to have at least some sort of insight into what happens, within 6 years to blow these communities apart. Because if I have to wait till February to find out, that's going to be really frustrating. So the one thing to consider with all of these scenarios is that the different means to which each community or each entity kind of protects their heart. And it's obvious to me, like when you look at the kingdom, Zeke and Carol are completely helicopter parenting Henry. Like they're doing what they can to get to be a little bit more hands off. But at the same time, there's only so much that they can do. And I think that Carol recognizes that. I think that if Henry is to be a man and to be a warrior and to actually be somewhat of a leader, which he's kind of stepping into that role, I think that he needs to get some real life experience from Daryl. And I agree with you, Eye in the Dark too. I think Daryl and Henry would be a good pairing. I think they can feed off of some of their strengths and weaknesses. I think Daryl does need to have somebody in his life, kind of like Rick, that has a sense or an instinct about right or wrong. And then maybe even, as we've seen, Daryl does have a sense of right and wrong, good and bad and stuff like that. And I think he'll be able to kind of express things that Carol is uncomfortable expressing in terms of right and wrong. Like, obviously, Carol can tell people about right and wrong. But I think as we've seen with the Marauders, the Savior Marauders, I think she's afraid she's going to pass on the wrong message, as she might have already had, by showing Henry that she has the ring, and that maybe Henry should be a little more terrified of her, because maybe that's not the right way to be. And I think Daryl's a bit more tactical. I mean, yeah, he can be just as rough, but but I think he's shown compassion before. I mean, we've seen that with Dwight. I don't know if... I think we have seen some of that with Carol. I think... instead of killing Jed outright a couple of times, one time being the hostage situation with Rick, I think she was just following Rick's lead. But the thing that may stand out a little bit, and we don't really know, is what happened at Bridge Camp. When Oceanside started firing at the Saviors and she said no, it cuts out. So, and Jed does mention that that she kind of saved him a little bit, back there. He's obviously still alive, so she did something to protect him, and maybe that's her biggest regret. I don't know. But what I do know is that I think she does not want, or doesn't have the ability to pass on the kinds of real world advice and nuance when it comes to dealing with people more than Daryl could. And that's great, because I think they'll feed off a lot from each other. New Rick, let's say. So, but then we go back to the new group, and it's obvious that instead of kind of rolling their eyes at Luke every time he talks and kind of takes the mic, they kind of encourage him. They kind of they kind of react to what he says in a positive way or in an agreeable way. They do see that when Luke speaks, that he's an extension of them. And that they accept his word when it comes to the way they really want to express themselves when they obviously can't. Like if you look at Magna try to react to everybody, it's more aggressive and more standoffish. But when Luke speaks, she emotes, you know? So yeah, we do see that. And I think it's like in the simplest terms, the fact that they all react and they all kind of react along with Luke is kind of like a 5.1 stereo sound kind of thing, like where Luke is the center speaker. You know, he gets a lot of the screen time, and they're okay with that. And it's one thing I noticed about the group is that, and Luke points this out very clearly, like if you looked at all of us on the lunch table, it's like couldn't be more different. We couldn't have come from more different places, and it's kind of true. But the fact that they're all breathing is what keeps them together. And so when you see Luke speak for them and they react in kind, like they are an extension, he's an extension of the group. And then when it comes to action, he kind of retreats within them, you know, like in the circle. You know, he does take part, but he is kind of, you know, exposed. And so they protect him because they realize how vital the heart is. And maybe they realized it before anybody else has. So, so Zeke and Carol to Henry, rest of Magna's group to Luke. And I think it's obvious to say that, like, the person that is heavily protected in Alexandria is, I mean, obviously by firewall is, like, Sadiq. I mean, he doesn't go out. He's a doctor. But then there's Judith. Now, Judith does go out, but she's protected by many adults. I mean, she is capable. I mean, clearly. She's learning how to use a sword. She has a sword. I think it's fantastic. I think it's really, really cool to see. But, you know, the group does kind of, you know, lose track of her every once in a while. And they do have a hard time keeping track of her. And she, every now and again, she'll pick up a new group. But, you know, at the same time, you know, everybody around her is trying to keep her safe and protected and everything. And it's kind of fun to watch. And that pretty much covers it. I think the rest of this season is going to, you know, revolve around the idea of the heart and what happens when that heart is removed. I mean, we are already seeing some of that when it comes to Bernie, finding Bernie, being a part of that herd that trounces their Magna's group's old camp. And part of the interesting about that group is how the herd basically comes around again after going through it. So you can clearly see, you know, between the herd coming back on their camp, you know, along with Bernie, and then also what happens to Eugene and Rosita in terms of the herd kind of making a U-turn and going back to the water tower, you do see elements of the Whisperer's hand and all of that. I mean, especially obviously when you hear them with Rosita and Eugene. Hey, so what do you guys think about Daryl doing the little intro to previously on The Walking Dead? I thought it was a good handoff, and they are seeming to actually push him as kind of like the flagship character. If you notice, like if you've seen some of the promo materials for Talking Dead, you know, when they go on break between commercial breaks, they kind of bring him up as the kind of you know, Sundays at AMC 9 p.m. 8 p.m. Central. You know, oh, thank you, Eye in the Dark too. I really appreciate that. It's you have no idea the serial killer board that I've got going behind, you know, into doing a solo show, because like it's all on my own. I literally have, if I should take a screenshot of my left monitor, I have like sticky notes full of talking points and like tracking points, plus a Word doc of like a bird's eye view of the kind of things I wanted to talk about in terms of concepts. The edited version of this podcast is probably going to be far better, and but I think the biggest thing about doing a live show is the ability to interact with the crowd. You know, like you. I mean, you've been a really big help. Oh, you asked a question too, and I missed it. Question. Daryl's vest has wings in the back. Have you noticed the right wing is mostly missing from the top down? I didn't. I did not. What do you think it means? And do you think it may be part of like what happened, or maybe it's like an angel with its wings kind of broken, like a little baby birdie? I mean, there is that bird analogy and that bird imagery, and maybe there's an identification with that. You know, the idea that he's a bird that has an unmended wing or something, and maybe that unmended wing is Rick not being in his life anymore, his right hand or his right wing. The little baby bird wing is missing, like him being hobbled. There's a lot of imagery on the show that a lot of people don't talk about. Something that I brought up in season 8. You see Jadis use some of the blue paint in her canvas before. I think this is before Stephen Ogg arrives, Simon, and kills Tamiel and all that stuff. And they use the same color blue paint, Judith and Carl, on the patio, on the porch, when they're putting their handprints on the at the corner. And obviously we see the handprints in Michonne's house. And I was just trying to figure out what that means. What is that? What ties Jadis and Carl and Judith and stuff like that? What is the significance? And like Carol's just kind of like, I don't know. And I'm like, come on, help me out here. They don't do these things for no reason. So there's things like that happen. For the longest time we didn't know what the A's and the A's were and the B's were at the heaps, things like that. And we didn't know until just now. And we had assumed it was A for Alexandria, kind of like what they were doing at the sanctuary. But it wasn't that. So who knows? I have like a cup of coffee because it's obviously daytime, and I poured a whole bunch of this tequila Baileys. I was hoping to be more drunk for this. Hey, so what are you guys doing today? Like, are you guys at work? How are you hanging in there? Where are you from? Tell me a little bit more about you, because I'm kind of curious to see how people are spending their Friday, especially people in the U.S. I mean, it's kind of a split between, there are, I think half the people I know are going to work and half aren't. But I'm really curious. What's your deal, people? Obviously, I'm not at work. Or if I am, I'm a really crappy employee. I don't have work. But you know what? I'll tell you what. I wouldn't know if I had work anyway. Because I'm with you guys. And I have all my other means of communication muted right now. It's all about you and me. But mostly you. But mostly me. Because it's just me. And part of what I want to do is to change that a little bit. Oh. I mean, I do have one more big ticket topic to talk about. Hey, did you guys catch Talking Dead 2? The last one with Cudlitz and Dan Fogler and the Lynch siblings. I had only caught that today because I had gone hiking that last Sunday, and I barely finished watching The Walking Dead that Sunday. And when it came to time for Talking Dead, I just completely passed out. I did not see a bit of that. And I just thought it was really interesting to hear how production will absolutely stop, based on certain conditions. And Dan Fogler looked like he was absolutely high, but it was absolutely amazing to watch because he was just so in the here and now. If I was him, I'd be doing the same thing, playing with some of the props that are on the coffee table and getting progressively more high. Oh man, and it's kind of amazing to see him, the difference between his character first of all in real life, but then also in The Walking Dead, and then also in Fantastic Beasts, how different they are. Wow, there is a huge lag because you just said he did see the bird's nest, bluebird. Yeah, there is a huge lag. Okay. I see you laughing, but the problem is that there's such a huge lag. Eye in the Dark too, is that I don't know what you're laughing specifically at now, because I have just spewed a bunch of crap just now, and I have no track. Oh man, hysterical. Yeah, I've been curious about where you're from, Eye in the Dark too. Also, when the stream finally catches up. I've been kind of curious about where everybody's from. We are TRD, we are TWD 73/93 or 70. I forget I know she has a 93 account, or he. I don't know. But now he's far away, or she's far away. I guess some people live in the shadows a little bit more than some people. I'm fairly public. I mean, you have to kind of dig just a little bit to find out who I am and where I'm from and all that stuff. But I mean, I'm fairly public. I used to not be, but for the sake of the show, I decided to kind of creep out of the shadows and present myself to the world. It's a good thing I'm recording this because that was a pretty good accent. But yeah, I mean, I'm your host, David Cameo. I'm from Brooklyn, New York. I like long walks on the beach. Whether during the day, at night, in winter, or in summer. I'm a hopeless romantic at heart. Don't know what else to say about me. I like The Walking Dead. I like Fear the Walking Dead. In some respects, I like each of them for different reasons. I'm a singer-songwriter. That's a good thing to mention. I haven't done that in a while, but I do fantasize about getting back into it. If I can get a handle of this computer. Watching XSplit, this what I'm using to broadcast to Instagram, watching it start is like watching paint dry. It's just logging in. Oh, why do you even need to log in? What is your deal, XSplit? What are you lacking in life? So that's what I'm dealing with right now. Oh, by the way, I am the Dark too. I don't know if you've said anything yet, but we'll see in a second. For the last couple weeks since you released that video on your YouTube channel. So if you guys want to see this video, and I've meant to repost it, by the way. But I in the Dark 2, if you just look for I_in_the_dark2, her latest video is absolutely infectious. The song that she chose and the visuals. And this was basically around the time where episode 5 aired, and it was really kind of focusing on Daryl and Rick's relationship and, you know, the whole idea of being brothers and stuff like that. But every time I'm about to go up to do a broadcast, I start singing the damn song. I'm like, I got you, brother. I got you, brother. So I do that every time I get on the mic because it's just a good way of kind of hearing my levels. You know, because in case I start screaming, I know how high I'm going to be. But singing is kind of like the mid-level to that. So it's very infectious. You know, and I know that you didn't create the song and blah blah blah, but you know, different strokes. You're the one who started it. She who smelt it dealt it. Well, actually, technically, it was me then. I guess it is my fault. You know, I used to work in radio, like very amateur college, post-college radio. We had a show before shows were podcasts on the internet, and we would not have put up with this bullshit. I'll tell you right now. Yeah, and now the printer's going off. It's really professional. It's really, really good operation we've got going here. Oh, that really does take the bricks out of the bag when things like this happen. I find it more funny and hilarious than it is a matter of professionalness. Professionalness? That's a word now, today. My wife is a teacher, so we have to kind of give her a little bit of rope. She needs her printouts. I keep forgetting that I put it on slow mode. My fear when it comes to YouTube chat, and this is like the stupidest fear to have if you're a small outfit like us, my fear is not being able to catch up with the chat. Here's the thing. We don't have a huge enough audience to be worried about it, but like I have this thing in the back of my mind that like I'm an engineer, so it's kind of like I'm always prepared for the worst case scenario. Like if people start flooding the chat, you know what's going to happen. So I keep it on slow mode to kind of give it a 60-second lag. So, I probably should take that off, you know, just to have a more interactive chat with you. Just stupid. Me and my dumb engineer brain. I've out-engineered myself. This is like, by the way, where I'm at right now is where, like, when I listen to other podcasts, like, not as much the Walking Dead podcast, but some, it's that equivalent. I think this is karma, actually. I when I was in college, I was just telling you guys about the college radio show that I used to have. It was just a bunch of guys telling like weird but real stories that happened to both us and in the news. You know, we would read a lot of FARQ.com, FARQ, I think it was .com articles. And we were like pretty good. We were like a solid group. You know, I wasn't really leading the show. I was more of color commentary. And you know, we had a really good thing going. We thought, you know, if we'd gone any further, we would have gone the way of like a podcast, of the way of maybe YouTube even. We kind of like got screwed out, and we kind of all split up. And but like at the time, I was listening to some of the other stations, the other outfits that were on the station that we were broadcasting from, and on the internet page. And it was just like nails on a chalkboard, just trying to listen to some of these other hosts because they're doing exactly like what I'm doing right now. Just kind of like talking out loud and going, "Hey, that's really cool. Yeah, okay. Next thing that we're gonna talk about," and like. But more talking to themselves and more and here's the mistake that you make as a broadcaster who's in a relationship with another quote unquote broadcaster. I can say quote unquote because now she's a long time ex-girlfriend. is that it's not a good idea to tell your girlfriend that her show sucks. Or not that her show sucks. I had just said that our show is way better than hers because it was, okay, first of all. Second of all, like I would listen to her show and it would really be just, it was just a lot of giggling at the end of the day. Like it would be about like, emo music, basically talking about emo music, people in the news and stuff like that. But it just didn't seem in any way cohesive. And at least we had kind of like a program idea. We kind of work on improving the show with every episode. And just listening to her show, I listened to it like a couple of times. It was just this thing where, like, she and her co-host would just kind of giggle. Every time they brought up something, and it would be like 5 minutes of giggling, and then maybe 3 minutes of talking about something relating to emo music. And, I mean, I have to thank her. I kind of got into that realm of music, but at the same time, no thanks. It was probably one of my worst relationships I've ever been in, and partially because there was like that competitive element, like where she couldn't compete, and I would, and it would be always this thing where because I mentioned how, how much better our show was than the other ones. I'm so glad. It just became a bone of contention within our relationship. So, what are you gonna do? Oh, so yeah. I in the dark is saying you're making me cry. You've touched my heart, telling others about my video. And yeah, I mean it's true. It was really touching. It was touching to watch. It was a really great sequence of just the way you weaved the music and then the feeling and the way you cut the video. It was a really good video. And, at some point I'm going to be sharing that. Things just get in the way. The fact that I'm here right now is evidence of that. The fact that Carol's not here with me. So, my wife just came in here and said, what the fuck are you guys talking about? I'm trying to figure this out right now. Okay, so the third thing I wanted to talk about was isolation. Okay, so the thing that's going on with the three communities right now is they're in three separate modes of openness. So yeah, I did already mention that the idea that Oceanside may have been condemned to death, for killing the saviors at Bridge Camp. But whatever it was, whatever the event was that really rocked the communities, the one thing that ties everything together is that whatever it was, the impact stuck with all of them, no matter who it was. And the thing that's unraveling everything right now is the introduction of this new group and the idea of walkers that can talk and have intention and seek out their prey a lot more intelligently. So, I in the dark too is noticing that the printer went off. Finally, there's got to be like a 5-minute delay at least. So the way they present themselves is as follows. Okay, so you got Alexandria. So Alexandria has completely cut itself off from the other communities, in a manner of speaking, like as a matter of policy, let's put it that way. Especially Hilltop. They have protocols against taking in strangers and really seeking out other people and helping other people out, which is like a direct violation of what Carl and Rick, as an extension, wanted for the future. The idea that people are key. It's us versus the dead. So this is the thing that causes them to causes Michonne to kind of talk to herself, because she's constantly having to defend herself to ghosts. And when you look at the king, but the thing about that is that in terms of isolation though, you do see eventually that Aaron does travel outwards, and meets up with Jesus every now and again. They do kind of keep a line of communication open, especially since the fair is the thing. The fair is what it's all about. And this is something that they've been probably thinking about for a while, and they're finally putting into effect. And speaking of the kingdom, a lot of people say that the kingdom is in shambles, and I think that was the case for a very long time. But I think Kingdom is doing pretty well. It looks like they're thriving a little bit. They do have some setbacks in terms of infrastructure. I think they're doing the best they can. I think they have some setbacks with agriculture, as you see in the beginning of that episode, and some infrastructure issues. But I do think that they are doing their best. They're thriving. They're trying to prepare for this fair. And I think it's the fair is going to be the linchpin into trying to actually get them back up and running again, because I think they need this. I think they need to kind of round out whatever holes they need to fill, in terms of, their needs, their everyday needs. I think they can handle it, but I think it would just be better to have this community, to be able to trade, to be able to have, look, they're a kingdom full of warriors, they do grow some things here and there, but that's what they've been about. And you do see them kind of thriving, not as well as Alexandria, not nearly as well as Hilltop, but, they're still part of the family. Let's put it that way. They're like the cousin we don't talk to anymore, but, we still have a fond relationship with. And I think sending Henry off to Hilltop is kind of a good first step, because the Hilltop does have somewhat of a relationship with the kingdom. And, sending the prince over to get some skills and to also learn some real life lessons is not a bad thing. I love I in the Dark 2's belated reactions right now to my story about my ex-girlfriend radio host person. Yeah, she does suck. She's horrible. Now, the Hilltop is, as we see from both episodes, the Hilltop is insane. They are thriving, like, they're enterprising. Like, if this was a conglomerate corporation sort of thing, they are out of this world doing well. To the point where, like, they have, like, agriculture reports they call ag reports. Like, they're, like, using acronyms and stuff. And it's pretty self-sustaining, given the fact that, yeah, Jesus is all but checked out, but Tara's kind of filled in. Maggie's gone. Something that we had suspected, but we find out in the last episode that, we knew she had finally taken up Georgie's request. We'd predicted it, but it doesn't really take a leap to figure it out. And you know what? Yeah, and I mentioned it before, the Hilltop kind of just thrives anyway when there's no real leader. When there is a leader like Maggie, like maybe not so much. There's a little bit more strife. Now, what is the catalyst for the story thus far is like Magna's group entering the picture to Alexandria. They're, it causes people to think about the current security protocols. It challenges Michonne, in terms of her ideals, like her newfound ideals after whatever the incident was. I think Henry coming of age is giving, Carol purpose, like hope within her child, maybe the child that she never really got to raise. And so I think she's doing it right with Henry. And, after Aaron and Jesus find Rosita, it give Hilltop a means to let others in, to maybe let Alexandria have a dialogue with them. And because clearly Hilltop has also mutually isolated itself from at least Alexandria. Not to the extent that Alexandria has from everybody else, but, they have somewhat. I think what I'm going to do right now is bring up my sticky notes and just go through a couple things that I found interesting throughout the episodes. Okay, going to the beginning of episode 6, just to bring you back a little ways. Michonne is kind of venturing out. Obviously she goes to the spot where we lose Rick, quote unquote. But when she finds that little passenger van, that little 70s passenger van, I'm so amused that there wasn't more of a reaction about her finding those 2 huge kilos of coke and just kind of like tossing them aside, because I was thinking to myself, like, okay, I know people are too into survival to be addicted to drugs, but I'm just thinking to myself, like, give that shit to Sadiq. It's a stimulant. He can make something interesting out of it. So, I just found that a little funny. Just the fact that, like, nobody's talking about the coke, I do love the whole sheriff figurine. I love how it's like a little totem that gets passed around a little bit, too. The idea of Rick, in sacrifice pose, technically. Representing like Rick and part of what Rick wants and his desires and the idea of community and rallying around a symbol and that sort of thing. And I think having that for Judith is very important, considering that she is forgetting, their voices and stuff. We talked about the birds. We talked about the Scarlet Letter. Things I found interesting too. I loved the interaction that Gabriel and Rosita had. A lot of people were really anti them, and it really kind of boggles my mind a bit, because I know what people want out of the show. I know that a lot of people want Daryl to be in a relationship. I do too. But I have my own agendas. I have my own suspicions, even though they might reveal themselves differently on the show. Like, take, for example, I always had thought, had kind of been leaning lately on the idea that Daryl is gay. And I think it's a reasonable proposition when you consider, or I mean, you could easily say, okay, you could go the gay route, but you can also say that, Daryl is kind of like an adult boy, who hasn't quite grown up. And that's more of an answer from me. But in the interim, it's fun to kind of play with the idea that he may be gay because, and even furthermore, I mean, I know they're starting to flesh out this idea of Aaron and Jesus being a couple, but part of me wants just Aaron and Daryl to be a couple too, because they were the original people that went on the runs. And I know how the comic book goes, but they've been flaunting, they've been kind of veering off the comic book path for a little while now. So, I mean, why not go into this opportunity to make somebody who hasn't really shown a semblance of sexuality really at all, more of an aggressive kind of nature, but like I don't see why they don't go that route. I mean, I don't see why they can't figure out a way to kind of go that path. So why not? Why not go that way? But then going back to Gabriel and Rosita, I love when the show has this opportunity to kind of play with the audience, play with their hearts a little bit, because they kind of know where Rosita ends up in more ways than one. But the idea that they can throw a little curveball in there in the interim to kind of get people going like, wait, what? I mean, who doesn't like surprises? Who wants things to turn out exactly how they're laid out in the comic book? I mean, with some things I get that. But with other things, it's kind of like, okay, oh, that's interesting. There's a little surprise here. Like, we thought it was going to go one way, and it's not, So, and I've said this before on the show, and I think I even said that well, actually, no, we never even got a chance to break this down. So when I saw this, I could literally show you the screenshot from when I messaged Carol. I was kind of like, whoa, Father Gabriel's getting it on with Rosita. And I was kind of like, that's really interesting choice. And a lot of people are upset about it, and I think it's really dumb. I think it's really, really dumb. I think there's something funny about Father Gabriel being able to get it on with two people in the show. Probably the two most attractive people in the show, in my estimation. I think given their careers too, I think they're both technically models in real life. Well, other than their acting careers. Or at least they're fashionistas, so let's put it that way. But I think it's hilarious. So more power to him. I think he's earned it too. So one of the other things I wanted to bring up was during that little run that Eugene and Rosita were having was one of the things I was noticing was, and this is something that I noticed in the ramp up episode that we had, episode 24, was that the idea of kind of making the walkers scary again. Now, we brought this up in season 8 when we were talking about Carl and how he ended up dying. And a lot of people were upset with the way that he did die. But I think part of what makes the way he died important, and I'll mention it again, is that it shows how dangerous walkers are. I think we've gotten used to the idea that these people are masters at taking them out. But I think to take walkers for granted is a huge mistake. And now that we have sentient walkers, quote unquote, basically the whisperers, I think that it's more important than ever right now to kind of accentuate how terrifying they are, and then including this whisperers element. There's an attempt here to kind of make it, like I use the acronym, like instead of MAGA, like MAGA, I said MWFA, make walkers frightening again. So I really enjoy the idea of what Nicotero and all the props people and the cinematographers too, because I am seeing a lot of elements of cinematography involved and direction involved in terms of camera direction and art direction that really kind of support the terrifying nature of the Whisperers. Oh, and on that note, I just found out that Michael Satrazemis, the guy, one of our most favorite directors from Fear the Walking Dead, and he's actually directed episodes of The Walking Dead before. One of our most favorite episodes on Fear the Walking Dead, Laura, and he's done more, but Laura and also that bottle episode with Alicia and Charlie in that house. He's going to be directing the season 8 finale, and so I can think of no better person to do that than Michael Satrazemis, because he has a way of painting a scene and letting it unfold in a way that's really measured. It's not too sudden. It's not too soon. Like, there's such a huge difference between the directing styles of the first 7 episodes and what Michael Satrazemis does. He's more good when it comes to, he's better. He's more good. he's better when it comes to slowly letting things unfold. He has a better concept of cinematography, of staging a scene. So, you really get into it. It really sucks you into the action when it does happen. So I'm really excited for that in the upcoming episode. But then in episode 7, we've got like the Whisperers saying things now too, saying more things. Like, she's dead, but we're getting close to her. Don't let her get away. We found her. Get her this way. I see her. So those things, it's terrifying. And I love how Cudlitz kind of went into that. He's like, we wanted the opener to kind of be in your face, confusing, kind of like the Blair Witch Project. And I until he said that, I didn't quite know what to make of that. And so, I think what I want to get into next was, okay, so the one question I actually had, and I know that we're not really going to get to it until later. And so, if you do want to leave comments, and I would love to get your opinion on why Michonne chose Hilltop of all places, in terms of where to leave Magna's group. Like, what is her rationale? They have no relationship with the Hilltop, so why them? Like, is it make it their problem sort of thing? Yeah. Addressing the huge lag. Yeah, I mean, since they have no relationship with the Hilltop, I mean, was it her way of bridging the gap? Is it her way of dragging the Hilltop into trusting people again? Like, if I'm going to have to trust people, Hilltop is going to have to trust people too? Or maybe it's the idea of bringing him into the council, or, we voted to have them stay, but we want to know what you think. It's a really good question, because I'm wondering why she decided to do that. What is their deal? Because it doesn't sound like they have a good relationship anyway, so it's something I'm not going to really have the answer to until much later. And the other thing about keeping them disarmed, I mean, I know it's a trust thing, but I'm wondering if this is not a little that Negan, you're just like me sort of thing that Michonne is exhibiting, like not arming them at all. And I also noticed the similarities between, just like Maggie was trying to avoid Negan in the first few episodes, after like that year and a half time jump from season 8 and season 9, you see Michonne kind of avoiding Maggie in the form of, taking Magna's group only so far just to kind of abandon them, when they get really close. And of course she can't do that when she finds out that Rosita has been found by the Hilltop. Actually, and to that note, one of the coolest things at the end of the last episode was when you see the 2 Hilltop spears coming down the hill on horseback. And I'm like looking at the one guy, and I'm like, I know who that is. If not for the beard, I would have noticed who that was right away. But many of you guys may or may not know about C. Thomas Howell. He was actually an E.T. like when he was really, really young, but he's kind of like a sci-fi veteran in a ways. He's kind of in some terms he's like a veteran B actor in sci-fi films, like many different sci-fi films. So just to see him like that, I'm like, what the hell? I hope he shows up again. Like he's a very good actor, actually. I mean, it's kind of a crime that he's not in more starring roles. But it was just to see him like as a Hilltop spear, or like a scout. It was just really odd and like oddly placed. It's just so weird. But I do hope we see him again in like future episodes. I don't know if that's going to happen, but why not? Another thing that I noticed that sorry, Eye in the Dark too. I mean, I can't avoid the lag at this rate. But another thing that I noticed from this episode was that we finally got to see Yumiko actually show her tactician chops. Like when Siddiq finally reveals the fact that Maggie's not at Hilltop, because of course Michonne's in the dark about her, because she assumes that she's there, and you have all those walkers coming in at the same time, so of course there's not going to be any blowback because saved by the walkers, we got to kill those walkers. So Yumiko kind of jumps into action and starts telling everybody what to do, including like Michonne and in her group. She's just telling him what to do, and I think that's really, really cool. But Siddiq just says, why don't you just complete the way to Hilltop? With Maggie gone, there's just no reason for you not to go. And he just mentions, what about Carl? What about your promise to Carl? You made a promise to Carl that you would, on his deathbed, that you would bring people in, that you would see his vision of the future. And I think that's it. And it's a good thing that he was caught off by the Hilltop spears, but I think it packs this huge punch. I mean, among all these other punches she's been having to take, among which Luke has even said, the idea of beauty in the apocalypse and the idea of art, that sort of thing. Even in the face of her question, Luke is able to confidently say, yes, it's really important. Even after everything I've seen, there's no doubt in my mind that, after surviving, we have to be able to build community, that we have to break bread. Now, another question that I wanted to ask to the general audience is the thoughts around what this festival, what this fair represents. And a lot of people, we were talking about the Owl Festival at the beginning of season 8. And I'm wondering if this is the same thing. They're calling it a fair, but I'm wondering if it's that. And I don't know anything about the Owl Festival. I know that Carol brought it. I mean, when it was said out loud, Carol did bring it up, and it has some sort of really, really big significance, at least in the comics. Oh, so yeah, after all the little bonding exercises that Daryl and Henry have, and Daryl kind of accepting his role as the guardian angel of Henry, I'm trying to think of. It's kind of interesting to kind of see that unfold. Henry kind of pitching in to help out Daryl when it came to the walkers and Dog. And Daryl kind of letting in Henry, and you kind of see this interplay, and Carol's very pleased with the situation too. What's really cool about that is, first of all, her manipulation worked perfectly. But you do see something at the end of episode 7, and that is when it comes time, when Daryl finally gets there and he finds out about Rosita, and that they're going to have a search party to find Eugene. I love that Daryl looks at Carol as if to ask her permission. There are a couple of other things that get lost in the audio recording for this podcast. This is Dave recording after the fact. And one of those things is the relationship between Eugene and Luke, how similar they look, talk, act, even dress, the colors they use in terms of clothing, even their hairstyles. Basically, when they first see each other, Eugene and Luke, it's kind of as if they're looking in a mirror image. And Eugene is kind of way past the looking glass, looking at Luke, his former self, and kind of criticizing him in a way. Also, Buko, what are you talking about? We make stew. So there are things like that come up, and I'm kind of hoping to see more of this interplay because it's kind of funny to watch Eugene criticize himself. You do see that some saviors have come around. I'm actually surprised at DJ being one of them too, because he was the one that picked up the axe in I think it was episode 4, trying to, in that mob that was forming between Oceanside and Hilltop and the saviors. But I guess he chose wisely, because he's kind of reporting to Michonne directly. So it's kind of interesting to see the passage of time change things between the communities. And speaking of communities, in the process of the Marauders, the Savior Marauders, bilking like Henry and Carol, we find out that the Sanctuary has fallen. So, it's kind of like you do the best you can and you hope people cop on, but at the end of the day, you can't save what's going to fall. It's kind of like, if it's going to fall, it's going to fall, and you just kind of have to let it if people aren't going to come around. I'm kind of excited to see how Magna's group reacts to Hilltop as well. I mean, they're going to Hilltop. They'll see Henry. We're going to see a bunch of new people at Hilltop as well, so I'm curious to see how they're going to shake out as well. I'm really curious to see where Gustavo Gomez has been, who plays Marco on the show. Apparently he is working under Earl Sutton, the blacksmith. So I think we're going to see him in the next episode. So that's going to be great. So with that and Magna and all those people, just watch and wait. Hilltop seems like a good place to be. Which kind of brings me to Angel Theory and how she got cast the role of Kelly. Apparently she was auditioning for the role of Connie, and even though she didn't make the cut and she had the right look, according to the comic book character, they still wanted her on the show so badly that they cast the role of Kelly for her so that she could play alongside of Connie, played by Lauren Ridloff. And so literally the TWD casting basically created the role of Kelly around Angel Theory. I found this out a couple of nights ago on her Instagram live feed, and I got a chance to ask her, and she actually answered. And it was a kind of really cool moment where I hadn't really heard of how this actually happened, considering that Kelly is actually a man in the comic book and actually is supposed to be Connie's boyfriend. But it's the idea that they loved her so much that they cast her, that character completely around Angel Theory. So I thought that was pretty cool. So it's no surprise for some of you that actually managed to listen to the live show that there were some technical difficulties, but among them were some of the things that I found out after the fact, and that was the audio cutting out in my backup audio stream,
And that was really disappointing because I made a couple of points about the Savior Marauders having picked up some equipment apparently from what it seemed to be Oceanside, even though it wasn't said out loud. Carol had referenced that the stuff belonged to people that we lost, the stuff that they stole, and Jed basically explaining how they had just found it, and so they weren't involved in whatever happened to Oceanside. And it's kind of clear that it's from Oceanside, though it's not really, you can't be 100% certain because of the weapon Regina has, which is kind of a harpoon. And so there are things like that happen. There were some lines that I discussed that were pretty interesting. And one of the bigger points that I wanted to come across and basically talk about was Squawking Dead, how the show is shaping out after a year, how we're reprioritizing the way we run this podcast. And one of those things is that we are looking for a third host. It's no surprise that we've been trying to do a lot more live shows consistently Wednesday nights at 10. And we've been kind of falling short for a variety of reasons. And I think a lot of the reason for that is, as we may have mentioned many times in the show, is that we are kind of workaholics, Carol and I. And we work like basically 60-hour weeks at our day job. And this isn't a full-time gig. We don't make any money off of it. But we hope to someday build this thing out to be something more. And I think part of that is going to involve a rotation of regular guest hosts, basically. Among them being Carol. I think she's going to be stepping back to take more of a control of the blog, primarily being a co-host when she can. And I think having a third host will make us consistent. I mean, I try my best to actually stick to the program. I have struggled in the last couple of weeks, but I've managed to rally and muster my strength. And if I don't make it exactly at 10, it might be like 10:30, 10:45, sometimes 11 o'clock before I'm ready. But, I'm ready that night. And, we go live, notifications go out, and then we have a show, and then we're good. Unless Carol is in the same position and she can't make it, or she falls asleep or something like that. So the whole idea being is that if you want to be a part of the show, I encourage you to leave a comment in this video or this podcast, or you can head out to SQUAWKINGDEAD.com. There's a little link at the bottom right of the screen where you can either DM us or on Twitter, or you can send us a message on Facebook Messenger. You can also email us at info@squawkingdead.com, and just let us know if you're interested. And if you are, I'll talk to you and see what your skills are, what you've been doing. It doesn't have to be just one person. If I have a rotation of people that I can work with that are willing to bounce ideas off of me, and that would be great. I want to talk to people that have skills, some skills on radio or some skills in storytelling. I can probably figure it out by way of having a conversation with you. Some of the other things that I look for are just people with just really wild and crazy ideas. Ideally, I think I would want to be hosting the show with somebody who has more comics knowledge, people that read the comic book to basically supplement what Carol's got in terms of that knowledge. Not required. Honestly, this is a podcast about the shows, but it's just merely a bonus. So I think that's kind of where we're going. I think the way the show is going to end up being is more of a direct interaction with the crowd, basically feeding off of the chats while we're breaking down episodes, and people chiming in with ideas that we can talk about on the show and explore deeper, or not, or just screw around. Every once in a while, it's okay to do that. It's kind of the thing that I personally have been discovering on the show, and I think that's kind of where the show's going. Another thing that we've wanted to do, and we're going to be announcing at our next podcast, or maybe after the next podcast covering the mid-season finale, is that we're going to be doing a couple of giveaways possibly. So one of them being probably another McFarlane Toys giveaway as the grand prize, maybe a Funko Pop toy. We saw some of the plushies that Chris Hardwick was giving away a couple of weeks ago. I think that's a really good idea for like a third prize. Who doesn't like that? And some of you guys now have children, and I think it's kind of a cute thing that both you and your child can play with. So we're just thinking of new giveaways to kind of have, and we really want you guys involved in this kind of giveaway thing, and we really want you involved more in the show, and we want to see where that takes us, and if it's something that you're interested in. We basically just want to get the community, the family, the TWD family involved in the show more, and I think it just seems that that's the way the show is going. And with that, I'm recording this basically after the fact because most of the audio is missing, and what I really want to do right now is I've got an hour before the show. I'm going to cut this thing up. I'm going to put it on the internet, and I wish you a good evening, and we'll talk to you about the mid-season finale shortly. See you later, guys.